Hi there. I am Ben, also known as Bardic, because there are too many Bens in the Clocktower community. I am the co-founder of Capital Clocktower, the local D.C. area Clocktower group here.
Hi everyone, I'm Tricia. I'm from Boston. I'm one of the organizers for Boston Social Deception Games.
I'm Roxxi. I'm from England, and I help run the LGBOTC server, and we run games in person all around the UK.
Hello, I'm Andrew from the UK but living in New York, and I co-run the Ravenswood Bluff Community Center Discord server. So shall we start by talking a little bit about what we do and some things we've learned along the way? Shall we just go along the panel?
Yeah, sure. So the big thing that I've found is that community, as you can kind of see between the four of us, can be fostered both online and in person very well with Blood on the Clocktower. It's one of those games that can really bring people together, which is kind of adverse to what your first thoughts would be with a game that is about lying to each other. So, like, you have to make sure to take that into account when you're like, yes, you are playing a game where you're actively lying to each other, yet it will bring you closer, question mark? It fosters community both online and in person, but in different ways, I found, because of how the environments themselves lend to the game. I had decided to start Capital Clocktower in early 2022. I got a couple of friends from the area, Carly from No Rolls Bard, and Noel, who has been on the TPI servers, and Linksel, who's on Off Meta, and we were like, well, let's try to form a group of some sort so we can play this game in person before it's even officially released. And then it was released. But we eventually got it started up, and now we run 5 games a month throughout the DC area, a couple in Maryland, a couple in Virginia, and 1 in DC. So it's just fostering an in-person community, and we have a ton of the people here because it's a local convention to them, really helps with, like, building those friendships that you just see. I know that people now that have met through our group now hang out, like, in person and whatnot. Like, and I just think that's really neat.
Yeah, kind of building off of that. So with Boston Social Deception, our motto is really fun and friendship were first and then winning second. So with our group and just kind of any community group that I'm in, there is an audience for whatever game or whatever you're trying to build. And so it's just finding a space for those people to find you, and then really making that space feel safe and welcoming and warm. Part of that is making sure that you have time before and after you play games for people to just hang out and talk. So for our group, we like to go out to dinner after our games and just hang out, not even talk about games, just talk to each other and become friends and get to know each other. And so building those other events outside of just gaming is what we're really focusing on next with our group specifically.
And that's something we do on our server. So it started off as a small group of like 30 people in Manchester that wanted to play in-person games, couldn't get the people together. So opened it up to the Facebook group, which is how I joined. And from there, we kind of rebranded and was like, actually, a lot of us here do fall under the LGBT umbrella. Also, lots of us are neurodiverse. So we created a space that was basically really aware of these things, which has helped really build on those friendships because there's a lot in common other than just Clocktower. And actually, we've created channels on our Discord to other hobbies. We've got sports, we've got TV, board games, video games, wrestling. We've got a ranting and support channel. We've got useful links to kind of mental health support. And it's really become more of a general community that actually people feel really safe, and we found that that's now being fostered in person. So we had someone who was exploring their identity. They've allowed me to share this story because I kind of wanted their voice to be heard, because I've got ideas about what makes a community work, but actually I wanted the community to be represented. And they've never felt comfortable. They've always realized they were probably non-binary, but couldn't express it. I've played in person with them a few times, and they felt confident to put their pronouns on. And they're now turning up and being in their full identity, and it's not just something that's online only, it's now in person. They sent me a wonderful message that basically made me cry, but that's what I wanted to capture, that spirit that we have online shouldn't just be online, it should be carried with us, and me and Ollie will travel, we're here, Total with Claire, one of our other mods as well. We go to all the in-person games, we're very active, even if we're not playing on the games in the server, we're in the community, we're meeting people, we're spreading the word, and I think it's really important that your admin team are visible.
Yeah, absolutely. So our Clocktower server was created really as a result of people having a very bad time on some of the other servers. And so we deliberately created a more inclusive and careful server. We spent a couple of months before we opened the doors being very careful of what is our code of conduct, what is the structure, how do we invite new members, what is the structure to change the leadership, what if we have a leader who suddenly behaves badly, how will we handle that, what does success look like, what happens if we're too successful, how do we manage that. We're extremely careful about the setup, and then when people came in, how do we let the community help change those rules if they want to and form it from there. So we've been very careful about our growth in order to make sure that we can maintain the promise of having a better server through that. So to that end, maybe it would be a good thing to talk about what are some of the core elements you think are most important for setting up a safe, inclusive space for Clocktower?
Sure. And I'm going to start by saying I'm going to talk more about the logistics of starting it up because I think logistics matter. Like, as much as you can go in with an intent, you need to be able to actually follow through with making it happen. And I'm sure the three of them can talk more about the morals of it. But in terms of, like, actually getting started, I did a lot of the legwork for Capital Clocktower in terms of getting our first game running. Where are we going to host it? How do we get the word out to people in our area and whatnot? I would say that the first thing to do is look for resources that are already there. If you're looking for players in your area, look for local board gaming groups, like on Facebook, on different gaming stores, like Game Castle. We just started working with them as Capital Clocktower, running games on every other Tuesday. We had not had contact with them before, and now we have a relationship with them. It's great. Find local places to play. Find free and easily accessible places to play. So the money's not an issue, and travel isn't an issue. Obviously, not every city is Washington, D.C. with an actual metro, but having a way that has decent parking or at least some sort of bus transit that people who may not have the fortunate way of being able to travel easily can get there. So we looked at libraries. We run one Saturday in Washington, D.C. near 2 metro stations. We run games. We found a semi-abandoned food court that had a gaming event already there, and we just kind of were like, hey, if we use this space that isn't tables, because Clocktower doesn't really need more than one table, like one small table, can we use that space? And just reaching out to people and not being afraid to be rejected sometimes. If they're like, hey, it's not what we're looking for in terms of this, that will happen. But finding those spaces, eventually you'll find the right one for you, and just working with groups to figure it out. And then, like, for finding the players then, so you have the space, you have the time, where are the players? What we did originally was we reached out to, there's a DMV board games group. And it's just generally board games on Facebook. Like, there's a lot of selling, there's a lot of whatnot. But I posted a couple times, like, throughout a couple weeks. So it's like, hey, we're starting up this group. This will be our first event. What can we do to draw players who are in this area that might be looking for this experience? But then also looking to the online community. If you may not be super active in it, and that's fine, but you may know someone that can help start to spread the word that this group in this area is starting to form. Maybe they know people that live in that area, and we can really start to foster a community that way. So I reached out, and I was lucky enough to have ties on the Pandemonium Institute stream, and was like, hey, hey, can you pitch this for me for like 5 seconds? Great. And a lot of people heard about us through that. So getting the logistics is the first start to how you really start to foster that community. And that, luckily, only takes like 2 or 3 people at most. You don't need a big community to start looking at logistics. I'll pass it off now.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think it's also important for, kind of getting back a little bit more to the question that Andrew asked, I think it's important for the leadership team of your group to reflect what you want the group to look like. So I know for our group, we are specifically trying to foster a safe environment for women, people of color, people who are queer, and so we're actively trying to get the people in our group who are part of those communities to take on more leadership roles. We want them to be the first people that people meet when they walk in the door. We want them to be the people out talking about our group and representing our community. And so that was really, really important for us to just make sure that those people are a part of fostering those spaces.
Yeah, networking is really important on both the logistics and kind of the image. So we have a Twitter that we run, so you've probably seen some posts, that will be what event we're next going to be at, ask us for an invite link, because that's one of the things. Our link expires after 7 days, just so we can monitor who's coming in and kind of where they're coming from, because we do know there have been some bad experiences. Like, this isn't all rosy. Like, this is a game that involves lying, gaslighting to a degree, and competition. So you are going to come up with that. And I think one of the really important things is how you manage that and how your community sees you managing that. So, having that strong code of conduct. We have some people, so we've just upgraded our system. So we have the Clocktower mechanics, which is myself and Ollie. And then we have the mod team, so Claire is here from that. And we have some others who have they were people that we kind of said, look, we've grown massively, we've hit 500 in a year. We need to change something up now. So they were people who, behind the scenes, were kind of monitoring and in games, and we were able to see what kind of issues were coming up and how to treat them. So most games will have a debrief afterwards if anything has got heated. Storytellers will check in. If the incident's a bit bigger, we will do an investigation, and there will be it might be just a reminder sometimes to go back to the code of conduct and read that. It might be that, if someone has had to be removed or kind of given a stern talking, we will put a post out so that people can see that we are actioning things. Obviously, this is where it's appropriate. Some issues can be resolved through a private message. And, you can kind of say this is what the actions were. A lot of the time it is people just getting heated. A lot of the time it's not ill intent. So yeah, I think that's really important. Having that visible leadership, having those people that, everyone in our server knows who they can go to if there is something that comes up. And because there is always more than one person at a tier. So if, for example, you did have an issue with someone who is on that mod team, there is someone else you can talk to about that. Because I want people to feel safe and I want people to feel that they can raise concerns. And we do it at our in-person games as well. I apologise for my language, but I always add my most important rule of Clocktower is don't be a dick. I think it's a great, it's a great rule to live by, but it also shows that, we're setting the standard. So and we did have an issue at one of our games, that someone can go to that storyteller in that moment and say, look, this is happening, and we can hopefully, without singling someone out, acknowledge this, and if it is, we will take someone aside and talk to them because we don't want it to come to that, and we've never had to say to someone, please don't come back. I think sometimes people just aren't aware of, just because you didn't have ill intent does not mean that the impact wasn't there, and that is especially important in cases of pronouns. It does happen. It's how you respond to that, because you will hurt someone, even if you didn't mean to. So yeah, we just kind of set that as a precedent right from the beginning. Just don't be a dick.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say that even as you have a group who are incredibly well-intentioned, and you might know them all, and everyone is trying to do this in the right spirit, things can still happen. And what's important, I think, is to have ahead of time the processes that you're going to deal with. You'll have to react in the situation and figure out what to do. But the more that you have planned out, okay, there were 3 steps. There's one is a warning, one is a potential suspension, one is a banning. Here's what happens in each of these steps. Here's how people are informed. Here's what an appeals process looks like. It sounds like too much, but if you're in the middle of it, it's going to be incredibly hard to do and set up in a fair way. So if you can set that up ahead of time, just doing it in a thoughtful way, and then you'll adapt it and change it as things come up, then you're going to be setting yourself up for as and when these things happen. Because as we may all well know this, probably, that it can take one unpleasant player to ruin a game, and to ruin many games. And so you need to make sure that we're able to know when it happens, to know what to do when it happens, and be able to take action clearly. And so part of what Roxxi was saying there about having your modbod team, we have our own called Evil Butlers. And the Evil Butlers are there to help out the team who are running the server and keep an eye on things if we spot anything that's going on, and we keep them involved in all the different decisions we make. And we set a number of, like, no more than 15% of the community will be Evil Butlers at any one time. We want that to make sure, again, it represents the diversity of the community and so on. And the other thing is that I think you said that was really key there, Roxxi, is the role of the storytellers. Making it really clear that part of the role of the storyteller is that people have a good time, and a huge part of that is after the game. A lot of storytellers will be like, great, game over, you talk among yourselves, I'm going to set up the grim for the next one, when that's actually the most sensitive moment, is after the game, when people realize they've been lied to or upset that they weren't believed. And so it is part of the storyteller's role, I believe, and it is in our guidelines and code of conduct, that the storyteller's job is also to run the after-game conversation and to watch out for issues, take people aside if they seem upset, and let them speak it out and help people feel better about things. Because the aftercare is really important on Clocktower, and I think it can get left behind a great deal.
I think of storytelling as like 50% running the game and 50% just group moderation.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is just as important. It's important to make sure your players feel safe and comfortable and heard during the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got
questions. Yes, do raise your hand.
Do interrupt us. That is completely
Cool,
fine.
I was like, I have a question. Oh, wait. Speaking of kind of the role of storytellers, especially in welcoming people who are new, who are in, one thing I'm really grateful for here is that all of the game masters or all the storytellers could kind of say, like, this is for people with X experience, or this is for people with Y experience. In terms of, like, onboarding people into your new group, to what extent do people show up and they're like, I don't know what Clocktower is, but I want to learn with you, versus I already know how to play, I just want to play? And to what extent, so, like, what is the diversity there, and to what extent do you think storytellers are, like, the orientation aids
Can
for
I-
Clocktower?
I also want to answer this, so you go first.
So I think we probably all do, because obviously with the popularity of videos, so for example, we can tell when a new No Rolls Bard video goes out because we get a lot of Twitter requests to join the server. Yeah. So what we do is we are beginner friendly. So we run games regularly on a Monday night, and we will go for the comfort level for the newest player. Most of the people in our server are more than happy to play TB. It's a great script. There's nothing wrong with it. You can still have as much fun as you can on some customs. So we will go, if you don't feel comfortable playing something else, we will follow your lead. We do have enough set up, so if someone wants to set up another game, they can do that. We also run beginner-specific games on a Thursday, and they are, you've never played, you've never used Discord. We're going to teach you all of it, and Claire's done a great job fostering that. We've had 30 people turn up recently to that. Most had played less than 10 games. It's great watching people that I've seen play their first game who have now gone to other servers and playing custom scripts on streams. It's a wonderful feeling. But I think because we are so beginner friendly and we will handhold if that's what's needed, it creates that welcoming space, because then they feel welcomed and it doesn't matter the experience level of the players, and our storytellers are really good at that.
when you are dealing them with an in-person group where you do not know necessarily who is going to be showing up at any given time, RSVPs is a lot harder to manage, just because like you send it out through email, you send it out through a Facebook, because no one has the same social media anymore. Like you have to give it through a couple different avenues. I have found that at least at our Friday games, when we have more than enough players to split into two, and we have two of our moderation team, or we call it an organizing team here. We don't have terribly much moderation for an in-person group as much as we do online communities, because I'll talk to that in a moment, actually. But you split it up. You basically have one of your on team, and they'll rotate every other time on who is running the beginner-friendly game. And generally we make sure it's someone we trust or on the organizing team like that we know that can explain the rules, run a fun game for the first time. Because there are people we get almost every other Friday that have never played before or have played once or twice and still want to play Trouble Brewing, and we'll have we will split pretty evenly between like an advanced game where we're running BMR, SMB, or a custom script, and TB. And I love running these TB beginner games because I just think that you see things that you just don't see once people get so much more experienced. So there's that aspect of like splitting into two groups. Pretty easy to solve, especially when you don't know who is going to be showing up. But then also giving it as an opportunity to train people you trust to storytell. Because Trouble Brewing is where you, in my opinion, should start storytelling, because you're going to get overwhelmed a little fast if it's anything else. So don't be afraid to allow someone who wants to storytell for the first time to help lead that game, but also be there as a support for them as well and help the players, because sometimes for a new player, having two storytellers can actually help a lot, because they have more than one person that they can go to and ask advice.
I wasn't going to add anything. Yeah.
Question?
I can add one small bit about that, and then come to that. Just to say, so this is actually where my day job comes in. So I build community software for a living for millions of users, and part of what the main focus, there's three key things around people's experience. The first is how do they find it. The second is what's their initial experience when they start. And then the third is what's their ongoing experience like. And each of those requires very different strategies and very different structures put in place. But those are the three key areas, I think, that we're touching on. Yeah.
My question was, when you're talking about these beginner games, I've noticed in our group we have these beginner games set up, but oftentimes there's only maybe one or two beginners in those games. So how do you work with your experienced players to make sure that the vibe is welcoming, there isn't as much jargon, there isn't as much like conceptual play? We have a number of players who will talk a lot about misregistration, for example with the spy, and for newer players that can be really overwhelming. So how do you help guide your experienced players to be more welcome?
Can I just check? Can people hear at the back with the questions? Okay, great. Thank you.
I can jump in, because this is something that my group does a lot. Our whole motto is, we're not a competitive group. We're not here to, if you want to do cool plays or play an advanced game or do any of that, it's probably not the group for you. With that being said, we do sometimes have people who want to play a little more competitively. So what we've done is we've put on advanced game nights specifically for them, rather than doing like a newbie-friendly night. Like all of our games are more beginner-friendly, and then we'll do something special for like the advanced players. But we have, every single time we meet, we go through kind of like our mission statement and what our group is all about and the environment that we're trying to foster. So one of the things that we say is, if you're a new player and you have a question, you can help one of the more expert players by asking them, because they're dying to tell you that information.
Yeah.
Too much.
So if we repeat that every time, if we kind of repeat the environment that we're trying to create for our expert players every time, it will sink in. They'll understand what kind of behavior we're expecting. We're not here for you to show off what you know. We're here for you to pull any new players in and make them feel welcome and not overwhelmed. So it helps to just go through it every single time.
Mm-hmm.
It will feel repetitive, but you do it every time.
Yeah. Oh. And in terms of with getting these new players acclimated, it's okay for the storyteller to take a more active role in discussion when it comes to hearing a term they may not know or like a strategy that they may not get. It's okay for the storyteller to interject and go, for example, a star pass. Like, people are going to hear star pass and go, there's no term, a star pass on the sheet. What is that? Be okay to interject because, one, your new players will appreciate it, and two, your advanced players will understand what you're doing. Because if they're part of your group and they might think back to when they first heard it and were confused. They might be like, oh yeah, this is jargon we don't normally use. So don't be afraid to take a more active role in storytelling in that roundtable discussion that happens before a nomination. What is misregistration? Why can the librarian ping off the spy? Like, what are these things that you would see in Trouble Brewing that teach core fundamentals that most people know and will just talk to, but you see and go, oh, that needs to be explained quickly because, and just jump in. It will take you 30 seconds to explain it, but it will give so much relief to your new players.
Yeah, similarly, on our beginner-friendly nights, we have a set group of experienced players that we trust, and we know, really capture the spirit and are not there for crazy plays and that winning spirit, but actually they're there to help people learn. So they will play in those games. If we're in person, so I generally play rather than storytell, we will point out who are the more experienced players and say, if you have an issue or a question that's not about your role, speak to one of those because we're not going to lie about mechanics to you because that's not fun. Even if I'm evil, I don't want to win because you didn't know the rules. So we will be very open and say, look, these people have played a lot of games. Feel free to talk to them. If it's about your role, speak to the storyteller, and that's really great. Like you said, we were all learning to play the game once. I'm still learning now, and I learning some of the interactions, and you're like, I would never have thought that the marionette sat next to the recluse can trigger a mathematician. Weird interactions like that just come out of nowhere. I'm still learning the game a year and a half in, and I love it, and I want people to enjoy it. So let's foster that because they're going to build up our communities.
I guess kind of dovetailing with this idea, to what extent do you use the angel and Buddhist fabled characters? Or do you not at all?
I can't say I use it. I say that it's good to have there because especially if you don't have a community, especially if you're just starting out where you have a ton of new players, it's great to have. But in turn, you can do a lot as a storyteller to basically do all that work for you in your opening speech to your players. Asking, I've never started a newbie friendly game where I don't go, please ask me questions. And I find that just doing that enough will help get around a lot of your problems. In terms of Angel, you may find that there will be times to use it. In terms of Buddhist, there are going to be times that you want to use it, but a lot of times when you're making these groups, you're going to get a lot of adults that can be an adult. And overall, I think that I know we like to talk about adults not being adults, but you're gonna find that your opening speech can negate a lot of the problems you might actually have with a newbie-friendly game.
Reinforcing that it's not suspicious to speak to the storyteller. They are there for that. Go and ask them questions. Go and ask the experienced players questions. And also as a storyteller, if you know someone's new, so for example, if you're playing online and you use the cottage system, you can jump into their cottage and just ask them what they're thinking. Are they aware of what's going on? You can have that conversation, and you can do it in person as well. So kind of having that awareness and knowing who are the newer players and kind of seeing if they appear to be struggling.
Yeah, I was going to basically just echo what Ben says. If you're building a community group with people that you play with regularly, if you've done enough work with your experienced players, you shouldn't have to use an angel or a Buddhist. They should understand what the community is and what you're trying to do. I've only ever used those roles at conventions when I don't know the players. And someone says they're new, and I'm like, I'll throw that in. But in a community group, your expert players should already know that they need to play nice with any players.
Yeah, just to echo, like I always tell new players, asking the storyteller is part of the game. It's not that you don't know how the game is played. It's part of the game. This is designed to do this. Talking about adapting for different types of players, I know, Roxxi, you were talking before about how there's a lot that you do around neurodivergence and disabilities. Do you want to speak something to that?
Yeah, so research has shown there is a strong link between those who have differing gender and sexual identities and neurodiversity. So we kind of find that goes hand in hand. So we're very aware of that. So there will be people with ADHD who will sometimes interrupt, and it's kind of how do we manage that in kind of reminding someone that actually they are doing that, but not in a way that's singling them out, so it might be in the night phase, just a quick reminder, and making that space, especially after accusation and defense has been done, and just saying any pertinent, because they know then they've got that allocated space to speak, and you're meant to be keeping kind of the accusation and the defense quite snappy, so that can kind of help the flow. When we've done in-person games, we ran an event recently and we're like, actually what would be great would be to have a specific space that is kind of away from the rest of the towns, that actually if someone is feeling overwhelmed but still wants to play and they don't want the noise of another town, let's have a quieter area where they can do that. Seating arrangement is really vital in person. So we have one player who does struggle, so they will sit the furthest away from another town. There's a lot of just acknowledging that those people have that, and that the afterwards things can get heated because people have misread social cues. So giving that space to actually air and say, okay, I did take offense because you said this, but actually I misread the situation, and now that you've had time to explain it is really helpful. Like I said, that aftercare that the storyteller can provide is really important, especially when a lot of this game, there are mechanics, but there's also a big social element to it. So giving that space for people to explain themselves and where there may have been cross-communication is really helpful.
And being willing to accommodate requests that you might get. Someone comes to you in private, and don't make a big deal out of it, but you may have to change your game up a little bit to make sure that someone feels comfortable. And 99% of the time, the rest of the town will not care, and it will be better for that one person and the same for everybody else, and that's still a net positive.
Yeah, so allowing note-taking. I have no issue with note-taking. I have no issue with the spy taking a photograph. If that is what would help that player, especially in newer games, if you're putting the spy in, it is overwhelming, and generally I find the newest player will pick the demon or the spy. I don't know how it happens, it's like a magnet. So just being aware that actually they might need to take a photo and let them do that, because obviously there is that danger of you're going to look really suspicious if you're stood there for ages, like, look at all these roles, so again, note-taking, absolutely fine as well. And we actually have someone in our group who's made a Braille script because we have a couple of people who are visually impaired. So we found ways to adapt the game. And actually lots of their recommendations have now become the accessibility guide through working with Ed, which is wonderful to see that actually there are so many adaptations we can make to this game to include people.
I was going to add one last quick thing, which is it's okay if you don't know all the ways to accommodate all different people right off the top of the bat. This is one of the ways that you can pull your community members in. There are people in your groups who probably know a little bit more. Like, I didn't even think about having Braille scripts, but if someone in your group is like, oh, maybe we should make this, then pull them into that. We actually work with a equity and diversity consultant. And so if we have questions about how do we accommodate these groups of people, how can we make our space more welcoming for this, we go to that. And sometimes stuff might come up that you might not think about, but just be open to finding a way to creating a safe and fostering space for that is the most important part.
Can you give an example of something the consultant said to you that you've changed?
Oh, so one of the things that we've been discussing is we are in the coming weeks hosting an event that we are now calling Femmes and Folks, and it's specifically for women and any femme-identifying people. And we had an idea of what we wanted this event to be. We didn't know what to call it or kind of how to specifically include the community that we wanted to include. And so we reached out to this person to ask, like, this is generally the idea of what we want. What are some ways that we can talk to and about this community that we're trying to create this event for? So they helped us come up with the name Femmes and Folks. And we had a long discussion about just kind of what terminology is appropriate, what feels like appropriation, what is okay to use, and how you create a space for those communities. So that was the most recent thing, actually, like in the past week that we've used this for.
Fantastic. There were some hands I saw.
You were talking about accommodations for neurodivergence and accommodations for the blind population, deaf population. Do you actually do anything to grow in those spaces? What is your community outreach look like if you want to expand in those locations and not just accommodate, but actually reach out to those communities?
So in ours, I think it is because a lot of us ourselves are neurodiverse, so the game has already adapted because of our own play styles and our own accommodations that we've made for ourselves in just how we play. But then we've had people reach out to us and say, this is what we've seen and this is what we'd like more of, and actually creating, kind of going back to that thing about creating a space where people feel open and listened to, because then they will come to you, is really important. Because, and this was again why I said about having the community, is I can do 1,000,001 things that I think are great, but actually could be not necessarily harmful, but like actually don't work for someone. So being able to have people say, is there a way we can do this? So we've had people wear their headphones during a game, moving seats, having kind of lo-fi music in the background to kind of fill up some of the echo that might be in some of the areas we've played. Can we turn off flashing lights? Those kind of things. So suggestions from the community, because then they feel listened to, and then they tell people, so then it's word of mouth, because then people are like, oh, we play in this game, and it's really welcoming because they consider the difficulties I have, especially in social situations. So I think that's the being willing to listen and try, just because someone's made a suggestion. It might not work, but we give it a go and then we build on it. So we're constantly asking for feedback, has this worked? So our big day event, we sent out a survey and got loads of feedback on that. So giving that community the voice helps you expand without you specifically saying, hey, we want more people who fit this category. Actually, if you're doing a good job, the word of mouth does far more than actually anything you can shout about. I don't know if anyone else will agree with.
I agree. I just don't have anything else to add.
Talked about the post-game, debrief, and aftercare. Can you maybe talk a little bit talk through that process a little bit and explain what that process looks like? And what kinds of things you're looking for that you might need to address, or how you would address it, or sort of just a general overview of the process?
I can start on this one. So what we encourage our storytellers to do once you've done the grim reveal, and then step back, because everyone wants to talk to each other, and watch those dynamics and see what seems to be happening. And if people seem to be angry or upset, you may well have seen it during the game as well. Some people might be frustrated because they're not being believed. So you can just write a quick note to yourself, check in with them after the game. So you'll have seen some of it in the game already, probably. But just seeing how then people respond. Is the team that won like crowing over the other team in a way that's kind of obnoxious and might just set people's hackles up, in which case just step in and take them to one side and say, win with dignity as well, please. And the people who lost seem to be upset, angry, blaming each other, pointing at one particular player, at which point they're stepping in and saying, listen, we've all done it, all of these things happen, it doesn't matter, this is a game, we're having fun. And if there seem to be one or two people, just taking them aside, letting them feel heard and get their frustration out and try and calm them down, I think is really key. it's online. It can be hard because some people can rage quit. But if they're in our community, we can reach out to them and say, first of all, are you okay? How are you feeling? And second, when you leave like that, it's hard for us to address that and help things calm down in the space. So come to me next time you feel upset and angry, and tell me as the storyteller about it, and then we can sort of help come back to the space. So doing private chats as storyteller after the game, I think, can also be really key.
One thing that my group does is the last hour of all of our events, at least the last hour, is for cooldown games. So that we can always end on something fun and silly. One of my favorite games to end on is Hand-to-Hand Wombat. I don't know if anybody has ever played that game. But no matter what, you have to laugh during that game. And so we have a bunch of just cooldown games that we will always bring, and we'll always end, because Clocktower can sometimes, no matter how much you try to foster how the gameplay goes, sometimes it can just end a little sour. And so we always try to downshift into that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I will also say that if you have a very good group, you have a group that after the game, no matter who won and lost, everyone seems like they're smiling and having fun, your best debrief is to let them do that. Do not necessarily feel like you have to insert yourself. Be a player in that sense. You are no longer the storyteller as soon as you feel like everyone had a good time. So just talk about what your experiences with the storyteller was like to players. Like, oh my God, I saw you do this. I totally thought this was going to happen, but not. And then just kind of incorporate yourself back into the group, because the one thing is, a storyteller is a player too. We are just as much players, we just have more responsibility. So it's okay to not have that discussion if you feel like it's actually more beneficial to let them be social with each other and just talk about it. And then give, like, in person, give 10 minutes. Be like, hey, we'll start the next game, 10 minutes, feel free to chat. Use the bathroom, do whatever you need. That will give them enough time to talk about things, but not too much time that they feel like, oh, well, now I'm just waiting for this. Like, give them just enough time to talk and for something to also, like, almost become unsaid so they can talk about it later. Because the more people talk about things, the more games you're going to have in general.
Yeah, we do a lot of that. The 10-minute break. Stepping back down and letting them have chat. I mean, we made a joke that we've created the Insomniac Club. So there will be people who, after the game, you'll like check on Discord and you'll be like, why are there still like 6 people in town square having a chat? Because they just want to talk about. I've spent staying up till 3 a.m. just talking about Clocktower, previous games we've had, things that have happened in that game. Like, all of us have got stories. I think that's the best thing about Clocktower. The games I have enjoyed most are not the games that I've won or lost. They're the ones I've got a story from. I've got so many stories that I can tell. But in terms of that kind of aftercare and debrief, going back to that, you will see it generally. In terms of rage quitting, I kind of have a slightly different viewpoint. Is sometimes people need that space to reflect and kind of calm down, because it is a game. I've done it recently. I was the Virgin. We lost. Someone was very angry towards me because I had basically gone, I'm not really sure who the demon is in this situation, and I voted on the wrong person. It happens, but because it's competitive spirit, and I actually had to just be like, right, I've tried to explain and you're not listening. I need to step back now and reflect and kind of go back to this. Why am I getting so upset? What is it that's made me feel like that? So then I could say to the storyteller and say, this is what I was feeling in that moment. When I'm sad and angry, I will cry, and I wouldn't be able to have that conversation. So I just needed to say, look, I'm really sorry for leaving. I will come back to you about that. And actually they were really good, and they kind of said, we've seen this, and they were very clear in their process afterwards. The team are really visible on our server. Everyone knows who they can go to. So, if they don't feel comfortable going to the storyteller, because it might be that actually the storyteller in that game isn't one of our kind of titled storytellers. It might be someone who just wants to try a custom script for the first time or that kind of thing. We've had messages where people have reached out and kind of said, this is the issue I've had, and then we will check in and we will speak to both parties, because miscommunication is also a thing, and kind of putting back in that okay, it's a game. We'll assess the situation to see whether it needs to be a warning situation. We have had one situation where someone had come from another server and there had been lots of issues. So we talk to the mods of other servers. Like, we generally know who might be a problem and who we need to be aware of. Especially, I will have a lot of people that come to me and say, this person is known for misgendering. Just be really aware of it. We've spoken to them several times. And actually, they played, we've had to go, right, maybe this needs to step up a lot quicker. But being clear with the person that's come to you with the issue and saying, we are looking into this. We will do a thorough investigation. We will make sure that it's fair on both sides. You'll have a group that will regularly play, we find, and you can kind of pick up something has shifted in the air. But with a good leadership team and a good group, they will know when something isn't right and when you need to step in. Sometimes it can just be as simple as reminding people this is just a game, not necessarily singling people out, because people might not be aware that actually they're over talking and getting quite heated in that moment. They will afterwards. Like, we find the guilt is another thing we have to deal with. So someone who is then genuinely sorry after getting heated. I know I'm definitely one of them. I've had many talkings, saying I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have got like that. So handling that as well. The perpetrator, I guess is the word I'm going to use. Offender, that's a better word. Will also have feelings that need to be processed, and they were still a player in that game. So being aware of them as a person and not constant. Finding the balance is basically what I'm trying to say, and having those clear processes really help, and being able to just talk to people. You create the safe space, people will feel comfortable to talk to you about those things. And if they're not, but issues are going on, maybe you need to look at what you've got as a team. Is there anything that can change there in your leadership team and your moderators or organizers that can create a space? Because, we grew quickly, so we didn't have a code of conduct that was really strict beforehand, and we had to kind of come up with that on the fly. But people want to have fun at the end of the day, and people don't want to come away feeling bad from a game. And we've had people that have felt that, but they've come back for games because they know that we have dealt with it, and that's really important, knowing that you're listened to and you're cared for and that you're in a safe space, that even if you are the one who has done wrong, you're not going to be massively penalized, unless obviously it was something that required that. You're still going to be welcome as long as you acknowledge what you've done, and there can be a change moving forwards.
Yeah, and actually that's extremely well put, and also a good segue to say I've made a document for anyone who wants to take it. It's tinyurl.com/clocktowerrules. So tinyurl.com/clocktowerrules. We'll send you to a Google Doc you can take a copy of, and it's lots of questions to help you with your setting up your strategies, your code of conduct. It links to our code of conduct that you can use it as a model. It's all Creative Commons licensed. You can take it, use it, change it, whatever works for you. It's really important that you plan ahead and get these things in place, but also make it for the community you want to make. And that's always going to be structured around the things that are important to you and your community. And so defining some of those. So yeah, if you go to tinyurl.com/clocktowerrules, you should be able to at least get a document that can ask some of those questions to set you up like this.
One thing I want to talk about briefly is the fact that you don't have to go at this alone when building a community. You're going to be surrounding yourself, and we've talked about our mod teams or our organizing committees or whatnot, and picking the right people for that can be very good. If you have the idea, great, but you're not going to want to take this on alone. And just finding the right people to surround yourself with that will support your vision and your ideals, but also making it diverse and making it so it's not all cisgender white males that normally dominate the gaming community. Find those people that want to also make sure that they have their voice heard in terms of helping lead a community that you feel you trust to help with this. Gender diversity, age diversity, skin color diversity. All of these things matter. And you're not going to get everything with a 4-person group. It's unlikely. But doing your best and accepting where you're lacking and being willing to hear when someone of something you're lacking needs to voice something, and being aware that you don't have the resources to field that immediately is important. And growing your staffing is really a much bigger process than people realize than just getting a couple of friends together. I said when I started Capital Clocktower, I got a couple of friends, but I also kind of knew who I was asking when I did it. I asked getting equal gender on the committee itself, and then when two people had to step back, either because of moving or just being too busy, when we had to pick new people, I was like, well, where else can we diverse? So we brought in someone who is trans, and we brought in someone who is a little bit older than just the younger white male, to help with that diversity, so we can cover more ground that way.
Yeah, I think it is knowing who your team is and where their strengths lie is really important. Like, Claire is fantastic at admin, like, loves a spreadsheet. You know, I don't really story. Me. I can story tell. I prefer not to. I prefer being part of that kind of in the game, teaching the mechanics through play, and being, you know, I will never deny a world, you know, so if I proc the Virgin, I'm going to tell you I could also be the spy, you know. There's no omission from what I do because I want you to know everything, and I will explain it step by step. Ollie's a fantastic storyteller and will run whatever script you throw at him. And that really helps knowing where those strengths lie when organising events and games, because it means when we do our all-day event, I'm on the day, I'm making sure everybody's got enough people in their games. You know, Ollie found a venue, Claire bought loads of little things that we didn't even realise we'd need, like clipboards and printing things. Really knowing who you're working with is really important, because you want to tap into that. So like I said, we had someone who has worked with those that are visually impaired to help make it adaptable. The community is a great resource as well. You know, what do your players know? What are the areas they work in? What can they bring from their day jobs? Like I said, you make community software. That's a really valuable skill. I'm a mental health social worker, so, you know, I've got that awareness of how gaslighting might come across and what might be slightly triggering for people. Really tapping into that and knowing and networking. I got really lucky. I took over a group from Ben Burns. So, yeah, you know, my Birmingham group used to be a monthly group. It was the largest gatherings of veterans outside of conventions before the Grims arrived, you know, and Ben was like, I want to go and do some other stuff. Cool, I'll step up, and, you know, and that group is still going, and we do it twice a month now. But I've still got that link with Ben, you know, so he'll drop by sometimes. And networking's really important because, like I said, you can know if you might have an issue with a player, you might know. So we had it in our server, someone joined and said they were from Boston. I was like, cool, let me point you to Tricia. You know, knowing where people are and what's going on really helps, and helps build that kind of cross-community server, which is why we're all here. We're all from different communities, so yeah.
There's two questions, so we'll do those, and then I think we're probably getting close to time after that. So here and then here, yes.
Yeah, how do you navigate, or how have you best found to navigate when you have a ton of people who want to storytell and a finite amount of games that you run per week, while still holding space for newer storytellers to keep learning, and keeping everybody happy? I just wondered if you had any kinds of tips and tricks for that.
In my group, we actually are very open and very clear about prioritizing specific people from specific communities with getting them into storytelling. So like, we want to make sure that like, specifically like people of color, women, anyone under the LGBTQIA umbrella is prioritized first with storytelling. We've done storyteller roundtables. One of our members of our organization created the Storyteller Roundtable book. And so we've done that. And then what we've started doing recently is at the beginning of every game we meet every other week at the same time. And I've started going to a coffee shop before we go into games with my Grim, and I've said, hey, if anyone wants to just walk through the mechanics of storytelling, learning how to use the Grim, meet me at this coffee shop an hour before our event, and I'll come walk you through it. And then if you're interested in storytelling at the event, we'll let you do it. And so if someone shows up there, then we can usually have them storytell first. But we also want to be very, very clear that we are going to prioritize people from certain communities. And that's not to say that we're not going to make a space for everyone. It's just he might be further down the list.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to say, first of all, the four of you are amazing leaders of ranging, diverse community groups across the world at this point. Let's say everyone here, if they're not already, will be thanks to some of the advice you've given today. So I kind of wanted to ask if it's all right, of the four of you, like what's one of your proudest moments, either for yourself in your community that you do, what you've seen in your community, just to, I could just ask if you've got any proud moments that you'd like to share.
That's a great question.
Stop trying to make me cry, Ollie. Mine is being asked to do this. It was a really big surprise for me. Like I said, the server was 30 people. We struggled to get 7 people to play a game and to hit 500 in a year. And then to have someone at this convention, a fabled storyteller, say, hey, we've heard about your server. Do we want to sit on this? I mean, even Jesse said to me earlier, I hear you run this. And it blows me away that people have heard about it and people are talking about it, because I just feel like all I'm doing is being a decent human being and creating a space for people to play where it's safe, and to be able to come and talk about that is such an honor and not something I would have expected when I joined a year ago. So this is my proudest moment in Clocktower.
I would say for my group, I mentioned in the beginning, our mission is just building fun and friendship first through games. So it's not one specific moment, but when I see the people who come to our games hanging out outside of this, doing things together, going to events that we did not plan or had nothing to do with us, they're just actually friends, but they met through our community, those are probably my proudest moments.
I'll go next, and then Ben, if you want to take us home. For me, it's that there's been a number of times now where people have said to us, either privately or in the community group chats, thank you, because I thought I'd have to quit Clocktower because I was having such bad experiences. But here, I've had such wonderful games, and everyone here is so great. And just helping people hold on to this wonderful game and feel accepted and safe feels like a huge deal.
I don't have anything deep like that, but for me, we as Capital Clocktower were asked to help run social deception games at AwesomeCon, which is another DC local convention upcoming. And for me, I'm such a convention person. Being the volunteer coordinator for this, but also doing it at PAX and at Origins, I do so much with conventions that to be asked for a group that I am helping to run to really take over this space with the people that they trust to really help run these games. I could talk for an hour about convention running because it's very different. But being able to bring my expertise into something that I think that helps introduce the game to so many people. So many people find this game through conventions because they're not in the space of the online space. So knowing how to do that correctly in a way that brings people to then search out once they get home, how do I play this game? How do I do this thing? Is super important. So for me, it would be that. And I'm gonna just add my funniest moment of ever in my group was on literally the day before New Year's in 22, we had a Poison Saint execution, and that was the funniest. That was the funniest thing that I've ever done. A Poison Saint execution. It was our youngest player. I think she's 14 or something, and she was just and everyone thought she was the Baron. And she just kept going, "I'm the Poison Saint." And it was very funny.
I have one moment that I don't know why I forgot this, but last year my group decided to host not a convention, but we wanted to just put on a weekend of fun and friendship and deception games. We called it FoxCon because if you've seen our group we're the foxes, we fox everything. And we relied on our community a lot to help us. We found a venue and booked it, and then we said, okay, we need people to help with food. We need people to help with decorating. We need people to help create the schedule. And everyone stepped up. And when we got there, we had this amazing event. I think about 30 people showed up all together, 3 days straight of games, and it was completely put on by the community and our group. We did a little bit in the back, and they took all the work in the front. So I would call that a huge success for us.
I know it's time. I want to add one thing. Thank you all for being here, because like the sign of a great leadership is being able to hand over the baton to the next people and watch them outgrow what you've already set. So for you coming to listen to what we've done and learning is really important for me, because it shows that there are other people that want to learn from us and do greater things than what we've kind of started. So thank you all for being here and listening to us.
If you want to know any more about any of the groups we run, come and talk to us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good job, team. Yeah.
Great job, guys.
Like so good.
Everything. Yeah. Like you saved the day with this. So you are fantastic.